Today's major news from Korea. By requiring the government to return the increase in salaries for civil servants with rank 4 or higher, the remuneration for next year will be effectively frozen, and vice ministers, including President Yoon Suk-yeol, will return an additional 10%. In order to support the sound fiscal transition for the first time in 6 years, the public service community must also tighten its belt. Of the 246 administrative committees, 81 with insufficient performance will be consolidated and abolished. The Ministry of Strategy and Finance announced a plan for restructuring public sector spending with this content while announcing the budget for 2023. In the next year's budget, the government carried out an expenditure restructuring of 24 trillion won, the largest ever, and decided to reduce government spending. This is the first time since 2009 and 2010, right after the global financial crisis, although the application of the freeze on civil servants' salaries is limited to those of grade 4 and above. The Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Strategy and Finance, at a briefing on the budget for next year on the 25th, said that the government will tighten the belt and carry out intensive restructuring. The following public officials will increase by 1.7% in consideration of some improvement in treatment. Grade 5 officers and below will increase their remuneration by 1.7% next year compared to this year. Considering 1.15 million civil servants as of the end of last year, the wages of about 980,000 people below level 5, or 85% of the total, will increase by 1.7%. In the case of this year, they decided to raise their remuneration by 1.4% compared to last year, and in consideration of the economic downturn of the coronavirus, they were asked to return the increased amount to those of level 2 or higher. Next year, the position subject to return has been expanded to level 4. About 170,000 civil servants with level 4 or higher pay the same as this year, and about 200 ministers and vice ministers who return their wages. In addition, the President, Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister and above, including ministers, should return not only the amount of the increase, but also an additional 10% of the remuneration before the increase. The detailed plan for next year's remuneration increase will be announced by the Ministry of Personnel Management in December. On the 30th, the Jeonnam regional headquarters of the Federation of Korean Confederation of Trade Unions urged the government to redeliberate the budget for remuneration for civil servants in 2023 and reflect the inflation rate. The Jeonnam headquarters held a press conference in the briefing room of the Jeonnam provincial office on the same day and pointed out that the average increase in civil servants' remuneration for the past 5 years has been only 1.9%. He added that the first salary of a 9th grade civil servant in 2020 is 1.68 million won, which is far below the minimum wage of 1.99 million won. At the same time, despite the fact that next year's minimum wage will increase by 5% and this year's inflation rate is 7%, the rate of increase in civil servants' remuneration for next year set by the Yoon Suk-yeol administration is only 1%. He argued that it was something like enduring high labor. As of 2021, the number of civil servants who quit within 5 years of joining the Jeonnam headquarters reached 16,693, nearly double the number from 5,181 in 2017. Considering that 90% of them were grade 8 and grade 9 civil servants, he was concerned that he could not help worrying about the future of public office. In particular, when the National Assembly deliberates on the budget for next year, the rate of increase in civil servants' remuneration should be set equal to the rate of inflation. In addition, in-depth discussions are needed to improve the treatment of low-ranking public officials. The Jeonnam headquarters warned that if our urgent request is not met, it will continue a strong struggle against the government with 1.4 million KCTU union members, and warned that the current government is entirely responsible for the breakdown of labor management relations with civil servants. If you don't like the temple, you can just leave the temple, and if you are talented, you can find a good job that pays a lot of money and change jobs. I don't know why. The Minister of National Defense announced at a plenary meeting of the National Assembly Defense Committee on the 29th that the Environmental Impact Assessment Council was formed on the 19th. As the Environmental Impact Assessment Council is formed, the normalization of the THAAD base is expected to accelerate. The Defense Minister said that it is clear that THAAD is having difficulties with its relations with China, and that the fundamental reason for THAAD deployment is the threat of North Korea's nuclear and missiles, and that there is no need for THAAD to be in South Korea once that disappears. Currently, the THAAD base is in a temporary operational position, so the US is constantly urging the South Korean government to normalize it as soon as possible. The Minister of National Defense emphasized that the working conditions are very poor, saying that the soldiers at the THAAD base are currently living in tents and containers. The Minister of National Defense said that he would make a decision by comprehensively reviewing the concept and customs of an international naval frigate ceremony in consideration of concerns regarding the ROK Navy's participation in the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force's 70th anniversary frigate in November. In relation to the ROK military's Japanese aircraft response guidelines, which is a situation of conflict between the South Korean and Japanese military authorities, the minister said that the review of the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force's participation in the frigate ceremony and the review of the cancellation of the Japanese aircraft response guidelines are separate matters. In January 2019, when Japanese patrol aircraft made low-altitude threat flights toward South Korean naval vessels, the military made guidelines for responding to Japanese maritime patrol aircraft in February of that year. The content is to actively respond, such as firing tracking radars against patrol aircraft flying close at low altitudes. The presidential office is accelerating the staff restructuring work. 2 secretaries belonging to the Chief Political Affairs Office were effectively sacked in the form of voluntarily resigning. 1 secretary from the Senior Office for Civil Society, accused of leaking internal documents, was also dismissed. Additional personnel reorganization through internal inspection is also expected. Regarding the scope of the reorganization, the presidential office said, the chief is no exception. 2 out of 3 secretaries in the Chief Political Affairs Office resigned at the same time, which is effectively a sacking measure. The large-scale personnel reshuffling of the office of the Chief Political Officer is interpreted as a result of the judgment that the Political Affairs line, which serves as a bridge between the presidential office and the ruling party, did not play its role in relation to the confusion of the ruling party. Another key official in the presidential office said in a phone call that it should be considered that the evaluation was made on the accumulation of problems since the local elections in June, not this single case, such as the absence of the ruling party leadership. The personnel change in the presidential office is accelerating over the personnel reorganization issue that President Yoon mentioned at a press conference on the 100th day of his inauguration. After the new head of policy planning and the replacement of the head of public relations, the reorganization of the working group, including the secretary, is continuing. There are many predictions that an additional secretary level will be replaced before Chuseok. A high-ranking official at the presidential office said that the senior secretary level cannot be an exception to this, and that if there are any shortcomings from the point of view of the people, they are constantly supplementing and filling them. Internal inspection in conjunction with personnel reorganization is also ongoing. The presidential office held a personnel committee meeting on the same day and made a decision to dismiss the civil society secretary from the senior civil society office by asking for responsibilities related to the leak of internal documents. It is the first time among the staff of the presidential office to be dismissed from office at the secretary level. President Yoon met with reporters on the way to work on the same day and said the need for internal inspection, saying that the presidential office must be the most dedicated and capable group to serve the people properly, and that the dedication to the country must always be maintained at the highest level. He criticized that the people's power to handle the comprehensive real estate tax relief bill for people who own only one house was on the verge of failure due to the opposition's hold on. The ruling and opposition parties initially agreed to deal with the bill by the end of August, but the end of August, which was set as a deadline, such as the plenary session for handling the bill was cancelled, is practically out of date. The People's Power Policy chairperson promised to ease the taxation of the ruling and opposition parties at a meeting held at the National Assembly on the morning of the 30th, but it is in danger of failing because the Democratic Party is holding back. He said that if the law is not amended by August, all the damage will be passed on to the people. The People's Power said that the Democrats are mistaking the tax relief for the rich as a tax cut for the rich, but in March of this year, the Democrats even officially requested the government to use the published price in 2020. And after both the presidential and local elections were over, what was the reason for the sudden change of mind? The government announced on the 30th that the 2023 defense budget had increased by 4.6% from the previous year to 57,126.8 billion won, and it will be submitted to the National Assembly on the 2nd of next month. The government's defense budget for next year is composed of 17.7 trillion won in defense capability improvement costs, a 2.0% increase from the previous year, and 40.10 trillion won in power operation costs, a 5.8% increase from the previous year. Among them, the power operation cost focused on boosting military morale, such as raising the salary of soldiers, improving food, clothing, and shelter suitable for future generations of soldiers, and improving the command and service conditions of officers. In order to realize a country where military service is proud of, the government plans to provide a level of compensation reasonable for fulfilling military service obligations. Accordingly, the salaries for each rank of each soldier next year will be set at 1 million won for sergeant, 800,000 won for corporal, 680,000 won for private, and 600,000 won for private. In addition, the government plans to increase the maximum government subsidy from 141,000 won to 300,000 won per month next year by more than doubling the ratio of the government's reserve fund for tomorrow to 71% from the previous 33% in order to help soldiers raise money during their service period. Accordingly, if you pay 400,000 won per month for 18 months as of December next year, you can prepare 11.97 million won when you are discharged. The government plans to increase the salaries of soldiers and the asset building program in stages to 2,050 million won by 2025 by combining them. The treatment of executives is also expected to improve somewhat. The government is planning to raise the short-term service incentive allowance by 50% in order to prevent a decrease in the application rate for other short-term service officers and non-commissioned officers due to an increase in military salaries, and to provide reasonable compensation for short-term military service obligations. Accordingly, the short-term service incentive is expected to increase from 6 million won to 9 million won for officers and from 5 million won to 7.5 million won for non-commissioned officers. At the same time, it focused on creating a barracks environment that would satisfy future generations of soldiers and ensuring the conditions for performing combat missions. First of all, the basic meal cost per day will be raised by 2,000 won to 13,000 won in order to organize the menu considering the preferences of the soldiers. In order to improve the living environment for soldiers, the current 8-person dormitory will be upgraded from a 2-person dormitory to a 4-person dormitory. In particular, while the scope of missions has continued to increase, a budget has been prepared to improve the command and service conditions for executives who have not received relatively much attention compared to soldiers. First of all, it is decided to double the platoon commander's platoon command activity fee, which has been frozen since 2017. Based on 25 platoon members, the monthly platoon command activity fee will be raised from 62,500 won to 125,000 won. In addition, a plan is being pursued to double the monthly housing allowance, which has been frozen for 27 years since 1995 and has not been able to function as a practical housing preservation function, from 80,000 won to 160,000 won. The military has decided to invest its budget in line with the early establishment of the South Korean-style three-axis system, which President Yoon has emphasized, including the long-range artillery intercept system in preparation for the threat of North Korean missiles and long-range artillery. On the other hand, the light aircraft carrier that the Moon Jae-in administration was ambitious for was not reflected in next year's budget. The government announced that it would prepare and submit to the National Assembly with a defense budget of 57.12 trillion won in 2023, an increase of 4.6% from this year. The cost of improving defense capability for the construction of the military power increased by 2.0% from the previous year to KRW 17.179 trillion, and the cost of operating the military force was KRW 40,108.9 billion, an increase of 5.8% from the previous year. The defense capability improvement budget focused on securing a Korean three-axis system, strengthening domestic technological capabilities, and strengthening the defense industry base. Power operation expenses focused on boosting military morale, such as improving food, clothing, and shelter suitable for future generations of soldiers and improving the command and service conditions of executives. Next year's defense budget will first be a kill chain, including a medium-altitude reconnaissance unmanned aerial vehicle, to respond to North Korean nuclear threats, a Korean-style Iron Dome long-range artillery intercept system in preparation for the North Korean long-range artillery threat, a Korean-style multi-layered missile defense system including improvements in Patriot performance, and 5,254.9 billion won was allocated to the Korean-style three-axis system, including the 230 mm multiple guns and the overwhelming mass retaliation and retaliation capabilities. On the other hand, the budget for the light aircraft carrier, which has been controversial even among the military and military experts, was not reflected. The basic design budget for this year's light aircraft carrier of 7.2 billion won has not been executed. Recently, 6,644.7 billion won has been allocated for mass production of Korean-type tanks leading the Korean defense industry, such as signing an export implementation contract with Poland, deployment of next-generation frigates, and securing combat reserve ammunition. In addition, 124.9 billion won was reflected in training and education support in consideration of the expansion of the Korea-U.S. joint training program in earnest from next year. The police have forwarded the case of Baek Hyun-dong's preferential treatment to the prosecution in connection with Lee Jae-myung, the new Democratic Party leader. According to the prosecution, on the 26th, the Gyeonggi Nambu Police Agency's Anti-Corruption and Economic Crime Investigation Team sent Rep. Lee Jae-myung to the Songnam branch of the Suwon District Prosecutor's Office on charges of violating the Public Official Election Act. Rep. Jae-myung Lee is accused of disclosing false facts about the allegation that he gave preferential treatment by changing the use of the site of the Korea Food Research Institute in Baekhyun-dong at the Gyeonggi State Audit of the National Assembly Land, Infrastructure and Transport Committee at the time of his tenure as governor of Gyeonggi Province on October 20 last year. The People's Power raised suspicions that Rep. Jae-myung Lee, while serving as the mayor of Songnam, changed the use of the site from a natural green area to a semi-residential area from 2015 to 2016. And that the entire rental apartment construction plan was converted to a condominium apartment. Prosecutors will decide whether or not to prosecute in the near future. The statute of limitations for violations of the Public Official Election Act related to the last presidential election expires on September 9. It was confirmed on the 29th that the Gyeonggi Nambu Police Agency's Anti-Corruption and Economic Crime Investigation Team, which has been investigating various allegations of Lee Jae-myung, the leader of the Democratic Party, has forwarded a case to the prosecution on the 26th with an opinion of indictment on the allegation of the disclosure of false facts under the Public Official Election Act. Police believe that the statement that the party's leader Jae-myung Lee appeared to the National Assembly's Land, Infrastructure and Transport Committee Gyeonggi State Audit in October last year while he was serving as the governor of Gyeonggi-do and that the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport had to change the use by threatening to take issue with negligence was considered false. Will be. In the course of the investigation, the police reviewed the official documents sent by the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport for the change of use of the Baikhaiyandong site to Songnam City 3 times from January to October 2014 and the statements of those involved in the case. Carried out. It was found that the Songnam City Residential Environment Division also made a business report in December 2014 that the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport's request for a change of use was a simple request for cooperation and reported it to the mayor at the time, Lee Jae-myung, the leader of the party. In addition to the Baikhaiyandong case, party leader Lee Jae-myung was accused of violating the Public Official Election Act during the last presidential election, in 4 cases, including 2 false announcements related to the suspicion of hiring an executive secretary of the Gyeonggi Provincial Office of Grade 5, and the GH Camp election camp. However, the investigation into allegations of misuse of Gyeonggi corporate cards against Kim Hye-kyung, wife of party leader Lee Jae-myung, and secretaries, will continue for the time being. The cyber investigation team is also investigating allegations of illegal gambling and prostitution against Lee Dong-ho, the eldest son of party leader Lee Jae-myung. In January, Lee Dong-ho's account was seized and searched to check the flow of money and the use of gambling sites. The police plan to call Lee Dong-ho to investigate at the final stage of the investigation. It has been confirmed that the prosecution specified the time when a large number of investigation secrets were leaked to the Songbol Group on May 24 of this year. Prosecutors believe that the group's beneficial ownership and systematic destruction of evidence took place immediately after Songbol's side was handed over the investigation secret. The Suwon District Prosecutor's Office recently detained and indicted investigators and former investigators at the same prosecutor's office, and specified May 24 as the time when they exchanged investigation secrets, such as a search and seizure warrant for an account containing the facts of the crime. This was right after the Yoon Suk-yeol administration's first large-scale appointment of executive officers in the prosecution was carried out, and on May 23, the day before, the chief of the Suwon District Prosecutor's Office was appointed. During the Moon Jae-in administration, when he served as the former chief of the Suwon District Prosecutor's Office, which was classified as pro-government, there were many evaluations that the case related to the double bell was not properly investigated. However, some analysts say that those concerned that the prosecution will launch a full-scale investigation after the change of command may have made an unreasonable effort to understand the contents of the investigation. On May 31, a week after obtaining the investigation secret, former Chairman Kim abruptly departed for Singapore. Prosecutors have requested a red wish for Kim, who is currently known to be staying in Thailand, and the invalidation of his passport. On the other hand, it was found that Lee Jae-myung, president of the Democratic Party of Korea, contributed a large amount of money to an inter-Korean exchange event hosted by Gyeonggi-do in 2018 when he was governor of Gyeonggi-do. In November 2018, Gyeonggi-do, together with the Asia-Pacific Peace and Exchange Association, a private organization for exchanges with North Korea, held an event that invited North Korea's vice-chairman of the Asia-Pacific Peace Committee for North Korea and others. An official from Songbol explained that it was true that it sponsored the Asia-Pacific Association for 300 million won in 2018, but the specific purpose was unknown. On the 29th, the new president of the Democratic Party of Korea, Jae-myung Lee, repeatedly suggested that President Yoon Suk-yeol hold a reception meeting, but the presidential office said on the 29th that the door for dialogue with the opposition is always open. A high-ranking official in the presidential office said at a briefing on the same day that when asked about the position of the president's office on the request of party leader Lee Jae-myung for a summit meeting, the presidential office said that it was ready to respond at any time in relation to meetings with the leaders of the ruling and opposition parties. However, it is interpreted that the president's office used the expression interview with the ruling and opposition leaders instead of the summit, which indirectly drew a line on the summit. The presidential office has a negative stance on the term itself. The summit is a term from the era when the president, the head of the administration, also served as the president of the ruling party, and the president's view is that remnants of authoritarianism remain. Likewise, it is reported that he has a negative stance on the single meeting between the president and the opposition leader, which is the usual method of meeting. Instead, it left open the possibility of consultations with the leaders of the opposition and opposition leaders, where the president and opposition leaders meet together. However, it is judged that President Yoon will feel a considerable burden on meeting with Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung, who is currently involved in various corruption cases and is on the line of investigation. Minister of Justice Han Dong-hoon said on the 29th that since the adjustment of the Police and Police Investigation Authority, the trend of criminal investigations has significantly decreased both qualitatively and quantitatively, as well as looking at the trend of increasing crime. And when asked who would be most afraid of a prosecutor, he said he thought they were criminals. Power of the People. A member of the National Assembly now faces various legal risks, including the spouse of the opposition leader. Minister Han Dong-hoon replied that he knew that the investigation was ongoing. To the police mentioned that the investigation was underway on suspicions of preferential treatment for development of Daejangdong and allegations of payment of attorney's fees. On the 30th, the government decided to amend the Health Insurance Act enforcement decree at the cabinet meeting to reduce health insurance premiums imposed on the property and automobiles of local insured persons such as sole proprietors, daily workers, special employees, and retirees, and introduce a flat-rate income system. According to the revision of the enforcement decree, insurance premiums on the property and automobiles of local health insurance subscribers have been reduced, and the average monthly health insurance premium of 5.61 million households, or 65% of local subscribers, will be reduced by 36,000 won per month. Although this reorganization will not affect most of the employees, it will increase the premiums for high-income employees who have a lot of income other than their salaries. In addition, 180,000 dependents who have the ability to pay will have to be incorporated as local insurers and pay insurance premiums. The income-centered second phase reform plan for the health insurance system will be implemented as scheduled on the 1st of next month. Local subscribers received a different deduction from 5 million won to 13.5 million won depending on the level of property they own, such as houses and land, but from next month, 50 million won of the property statement will be deducted collectively. Through this, 37.1% of local insurers who pay property insurance premiums will not pay property insurance premiums. The proportion of households paying property insurance premiums among all regional subscribers will decrease from 60.8% to 38.3%. The average property insurance premium for all regional insurers is expected to drop from an average of 51,000 won per household to 38,000 won per month, resulting in an overall annual reduction of 1.28 trillion won. Income insurance premiums for local subscribers will be changed from a grade system to a flat rate system. From September, a certain percentage of income will be charged as insurance premiums, just like employers. The ratio of insurance premiums to pension income has also risen, increasing the burden of insurance premiums for some retirees. Among the income of local insured persons, in the case of public pension income and earned income from temporary work, only 30% of the income insurance premium is reflected to 50%. As a result, 4.2% of pension income holders paid higher premiums. The minimum insurance premium for low-income local subscribers has been changed to increase insurance premiums while expanding the coverage. In the past, low-income earners with annual income of 1 million won or less paid only a certain amount of the minimum insurance premium, but starting next month, low-income earners with an annual income of 3.36 million won or less will pay the minimum insurance premium. Meanwhile, the minimum insurance premium itself will be raised to 19,500 won in line with the minimum insurance premium for employers. However, to prevent a sudden increase in the burden, the full amount of the increase will be reduced for 2 years, and 50% of the increase will be reduced for the next 2 years. With the reform, health insurance premium income is expected to decrease by 2 trillion won a year. The Ministry of Health and Welfare explained that the financial burden was within the financial range predicted by the health insurance financial operation, including financial estimates. The Korea Employers Federation has criticized the union for blaming the company for illegal acts in relation to the occupancy of the roof of the Hyundai headquarters by the Cargo Solidarity of the KCTU. The Korean Federation of Economy and Industry issued a position on the same day, and the Cargo Solidarity refused to transport alcoholic beverages in groups for nearly 3 months from June 2, stating that they are engaging in illegal activities such as obstruction of transportation. He also announced that he had even announced a resolution meeting. The Korea Employers Federation pointed out that the responsibility for this incident lies with the Cargo Solidarity, and yet the labor community is misleading as if claiming damages for illegal acts and contract termination are the issues in question. Then, the Democratic Party or some figures from the left-leaning political circles visited the site of the demonstration, making it difficult for autonomous resolution within the scope of laws and principles, or even trying to alleviate liability for illegality by submitting a bill restricting compensation for damages. It was argued that the wrong intervention by the left-leaning political circle would increase the expectations of the labor community and prolong the situation. He added that he is concerned that it will further spread the erroneous practice of fulfilling demands by mobilizing power and illegality that is prevalent in industrial sites. The Korea Employers Federation emphasized that the Yoon Suk-yeol administration emphasized the establishment of legal order in the industrial field as a major task of labor reform, and emphasized the need to actively review the swift response to illegality and strict law enforcement. Hyundai Inc. signed a contract to develop a smart new city in the southern part of Hanoi, Vietnam, for the first time in a Korean company. Hyundai Inc. is leading the global eco-friendly smart city construction business and is leading the overseas export of Korea's smart infrastructure technology. Hyundai Inc. announced on the 30th that it had signed a public development cooperation contract for the first time as a Korean company in an eco-friendly smart new city project in the southern part of Hanoi, which is being developed with Bitexco in Hanoi, Vietnam on the 29th. Bitexco is a major private developer that develops landmark real estate and operates power plants in major regions of Vietnam such as Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. The project is to create a smart city leading district in a new city about 50 kilometers south of Hanoi, the capital, and build and operate smart services. In 2016, the Vietnamese government designated Hanoi and 9 surrounding provinces as the Hanoi capital region. It has announced a construction plan to accommodate more than 22.9 million people by 2030 through the development of a new city 3 times the size of Hanoi. The president of Hyundai Inc. said that it will contribute to the realization of a people-centered future city where the environment and technology coexist through strategic collaboration with Bitexco, which leads the new city project in Vietnam. Starting with, he said that he would strengthen the company's position to expand Korea's smart infrastructure exports and accelerate the smart city construction business, a core strategic business of Hyundai Inc. BID, the largest electric vehicle company in China, tripled its net profit in the first half of the year. Despite China's zero-corona policy, BID, which escaped the lockdown in Shanghai, has more than tripled in sales thanks to the government's support for new energy vehicles. BID announced on the night of the 29th that its net profit for January to June this year was 3.6 billion yuan, up 206.2% from the same period last year. Sales increased by 65.7% to 150.6 billion yuan. In the first half of the year, sales increased by 215% to 641,350 units, surpassing Tesla to become the world's number one. BID, which started as a battery manufacturer in 1995 and started making automobiles in 2003, is well received for its lithium iron phosphate LFP battery it has produced in-house. BID started supplying the battery to its competitor Tesla's Berlin plant, and the Tesla car equipped with it is expected to be launched early next month, Chinese media Sinatech reported. China defines 3 new energy vehicles as pure electric vehicles, hybrid electric vehicles, and hydrogen electric vehicles, and has implemented various support policies such as reduction of acquisition tax, payment of purchase subsidies, expansion of charging infrastructure, and issuance of license plates. In May, the purchase tax on low-emission cars was cut in half. Premier Li Keqiang visited BID's Shenzhen headquarters and emphasized that it will continue its support policy to promote the production and purchase of electric vehicles. It is known that Samsung Electronics' finished product manufacturing business is undergoing intense voluntary retirement. With rumors continuing that Samsung Electronics Vice Chairman Lee Jae-yong will start work on manpower efficiency after the lottery and return to business, attention is paying attention to the background of manpower efficiency. Samsung Electronics plans to drastically increase the number of new hires of young people instead of reducing some of the backlogs of high-paid workers. As a result of the financial news coverage on the 28th, the smartphone business division under the finished product division is seeking voluntary retirement. Although the size of the voluntary retirement is not known, it is estimated that the number of high-skilled employees, excluding essential workers, will be reduced to secure maximum space for youth employment. An employee of Samsung Electronics said that he had received an offer of 380 million won in consolation money and a separate severance pay from the company, and said that he was worried because it was not a small offer compared to the case of his predecessors. Voluntary retirement, which is conducted through individual negotiations with the company, varies greatly depending on the affiliation and work, and the circumstances of the company and its employees. In general, it is known that managers are offered 200 million to 300 million won in consolation money, separate severance pay, and additional money according to the number of minor children. In comparison, this offer of a consolation payment of the upper half of 300 million won is at an unprecedented level. Some rumors circulated that even the manager level had been offered a compensation of 380 million won. In response, another employee said that it cannot be said that it is not a definite word as it is a negotiation that is conducted in secret and there are a variety of cases. He explained that it would be the right thing to do. As the number of employees at Samsung Electronics is approaching a record 120,000, the number of employees is constantly improving through voluntary retirement. Samsung Electronics' finished product business division conducted voluntary retirement for deputy managers and general managers a year ago. At that time, the company offered 3 years' salary and severance pay. An official from Samsung Electronics mentioned that voluntary retirement is carried out on a regular basis in order to improve manpower efficiency, not in a specific sector or target. The government subsidizes security deposits and moving expenses so that vulnerable people living in semi-subterranean areas can move to a better environment. According to the budget for 2023 decided by the government at the cabinet meeting, the budget related to the social safety net has been expanded from 27.4 trillion won last year to 31.6 trillion won. In this budget, 400,000 won for moving expenses and purchasing necessities and 258 billion won for interest-free deposit loans are organized so that vulnerable people living in semi-basement, Jeokbang, plastic house, Gosuwon, and homeless facilities can move to their normal place of residence. Residents who meet the income requirements can borrow up to 50 million won in case of moving to a general private house that is above ground in a semi-basement, etc., and up to 500,000 won if they move to a public rental house without interest. It also announced that it would provide the necessary expenses to purchase the Jeon's deposit return guarantee insurance for 200,000 young tenants. In addition, it has decided to provide emergency loans at a low interest rate of 1% per year, up to a maximum of 160 million won, so that victims of charter fraud can quickly find a place to live with a new deposit. Starting next year, new parental benefits of 350,000 won to 700,000 won will be provided to families with children aged 0 to 1 years old. Parental benefits will increase from 500,000 won to 1 million won in 2024. According to the budget for 2023 announced by the Ministry of Strategy and Finance, the government will invest 7.4 trillion won next year to respond to demographic changes such as the low birth rate. This is a significant increase from this year's 6 trillion won. Specifically, the parental benefit is newly established for households raising children aged 0 to 1. Families raising children aged 0 can receive 700,000 won per month from next year, and 1 million won per month from 2024. 1-year-old households will receive 350,000 won a month next year and 500,000 won a month in 2024. For parents who need their children to go to kindergarten or kindergarten after work, extended childcare support will be expanded from 420,000 to 280,000. To ensure that childcare can be carried out at night, the nighttime extended childcare fee for private home daycare centers will be raised from 3,200 won to 4,000 won per hour, and the cost of teacher labor will be greatly increased from 1.49 million won to 1.79 million won per hour. There have been several cases of Korean tourists being re-examined after they were rejected after submitting a negative corona certificate to a Vietnamese airline. On the 23rd, 3 tourists from a group of tourists trying to board Vietnam's low-cost airline Vietjet flight VJ960 at Noi Bai International Airport in Hanoi experienced an extraordinary event at the check-in counter. On the morning of the same day, tourists submitted a negative confirmation of rapid antigen test received from a large hospital near Lotte Hotel in Hanoi to the check-in counter, but were rejected by the staff in charge. An employee said, "This is an inspection method that is not accepted by the Incheon Airport Quarantine Office." Then, they received a tempting offer from a local broker who suddenly approached them. The broker demanded 230,000 won, including inspection fee and taxi fee per person, saying that he would receive a negative confirmation and board the plane as scheduled if he paid some money. Lee and his party knew that Korean Air also accepts negative certificates issued by this hospital, but they went to the inspection center guided by the broker with anxiety. After receiving a negative confirmation from the hospital, they returned to the airport and boarded the airliner. Upon further confirmation, it was revealed that the cost of the examination per person at this hospital was only 60,000 won, and the broker took the remaining 170,000 won as his share. Vietjet's negative confirmation had an unfamiliar word called panbio in relation to the test method. After checking with the Incheon Airport Quarantine Office, he explained that it was difficult to admit it, so he took this action. The position of the sword goats at Incheon Airport was quite different. On the same day, an official from the Incheon Airport Quarantine Station asked whether Vietjet would recognize the panbio test method and asked the passenger to confirm it because it could be done under the supervision of a doctor, but the airline said it was difficult to confirm. However, at that time, similar victims were waiting in front of the Vietjet check-in counter, and the voice confirmation was signed by the doctor in charge. An official added that he conservatively replied that Vietjet was probably well aware of the local situation, so it would be difficult to admit it. Affected tourists claimed that there appears to be some kind of link between airline staff and brokers. The victims said that as soon as they went to the ticketing office, the broker approached them, so they could only reasonably suspect that there was some kind of connection between the airline staff and the broker. He added that if there was a problem with the negative confirmation, he could inform the other inspection station at the check-in counter, but considering that he did not do so, he added that it could only be interpreted as intentional. Recently, the Korean embassy also took action when there were a number of cases where Korean tourists suffered damage while going through departure procedures at Vietnamese airports. The Korean embassy recently sent an official letter to the Civil Aviation Administration of Vietnam stating that some Vietnamese airlines had received many cases of inconvenience to the Korean people without properly understanding the government's guidelines. The embassy demanded immediate correction, saying that there have been many reports of cases requiring excessive costs for corona testing and issuance of negative certificates. Yang Hyun-suk, former CEO of YG Entertainment, refuted the claim of former celebrity aspirant Han Seo-hee that he tried to make an extreme choice with the trauma of retaliation. On the 29th, the Seoul Central District Court held a preliminary hearing against Yang Hyun-suk, who was charged with threatening retaliation for violating the Act on Aggravated Punishment of Specific Crimes. Earlier, in early 2020, the prosecution submitted an emergency medical record in which Han Seo-hee tried to make an extreme choice. At that time, Han Seo-hee was at her house after she finished fighting with Yang Hyun-suk. Han Seo-hee testified that she was traumatized during this period because she had a long investigation time and her content was complex. In response, Yang Hyun-suk's lawyer refuted the emergency medical record in which Han Seo-hee made an extreme choice in early 2020. The lawyer said that Han Seo-hee was dating her girlfriend at the time, and her relationship with her was mentioned in many media articles. During her SNS activities, her feelings of Han Seo-hee became known a lot. She claimed that she was reporting that this happened to her because her relationship with her girlfriend had gone awry. She is Han Seo-hee and she has actually confessed to her past and her same-sex relationships. At the same time, she said Han Seo-hee's words were inconsistent. She is one of those stories. Each time she rebutted, she pointed out that after the papers, the question naturally arises as to whether she is justified in writing the dossier. Meanwhile, Yang Hyun-suk is accused of intimidating and trying to convince Han Seo-hee, who was under police investigation for drug use in 2016, to report her B.I's drug allegations. Han Seo-hee, who overturned her statement during her police investigation, reported in June 2019 that she overturned her statement through the Anti-Corruption and Civil Rights Commission through Yang Hyun-suk's threats and external pressure from YG Entertainment. At the third trial held in April, after Han Seo-hee revealed the drug charges against B.I during a police investigation, she was called to YG Entertainment's office building and met Yang Hyun-suk. She said that she didn't like my singer going to the police station. Yang Hyun-suk forced him to reverse his statement, and also claimed that he was threatened by the entertainment industry, saying that killing you is not a thing. She insisted that she said that if she turns over, she will give a case and get a lawyer. In response, Yang Hyun-suk's side denied that it was true that he met Han Seo-hee and told her story, but that she did not threaten or coerce her to make false statements. The next hearing will be held on the morning of September 26. Prosecutors are considering changing the direct murder charges of Lee Eun-ha and accomplice Cho Hyun-soo to indirect murder in the Valley murder case. The Criminal Department of the Incheon District Court conducted the 12th trial of the defendants charged with murder and attempted murder. Before starting the witness interrogation that day, the chief judge asked the prosecution if there was a special reason for indicting murder by omission rather than accusation of murder by negligence. Prosecutors answered that these defendants conspired in illegal acts, and the main culprit, Eun-ha Lee, charged the victim with gaslighting, her psychological control, as a title. Hearing this, the presiding judge respected the opinion of the prosecution who charged with murder by negligence, but asked to consider changing the indictment. Accordingly, the prosecution said that it is currently reviewing the change of the indictment and will submit it in writing if necessary. Previously, the prosecution applied the charge of murder by action, which corresponds to the situation in which the accused was killed directly, rather than murder by omission, which is applied when the accused did not intentionally kill them even though they were able to rescue them. Usually, when murder by omission is found guilty, the sentence is much higher than murder by omission. Thank you for watching today. Please subscribe and set an alarm.